certainly is amazing that when Jesus saw Peter and Andrew, he said, just come after me, and they dropped everything and came after him. So, of course, it was this miraculous call, but we have to think that this wasn't the first time that they had seen Jesus. We see elsewhere in the Gospels that Andrew meets Jesus, and he brings Peter to him, and they spend the whole day with him. And so there would have been all these other encounters that sort of primed the pump for them to respond to Jesus' call in their lives. Back on Tuesday, at our weekly Bible study group where we discussed the readings, you're talking about the call of the disciples. Someone asked, well, tell us about your call. And I thought, well, so I did that, and I thought that might be a good thing to do this evening as well. If you've heard it before, you can just take a little nap, be about 3 minutes. So I think some people, maybe especially younger people perhaps, think that maybe priests get here like we're hatched out of some priest egg, or like the priest stork drops us off at the door of the church. But I grew up as a normal kid. I had a mom and a babysitter and a Cub Scout den mother, some of whom I'm pointing to real people here in the crowd. Not making this up. But looking back over my life, there was a lot of important things. And that ordinary life included prayers each day, like at meals, included Mass on Sundays and holy days and on vacation, just those simple and basic but so fundamental things to help us grow in a life of faith and getting ready to respond to the call of the Lord. Looking back, an important moment for me, I think, was my confirmation. Not because at my confirmation, the skies parted and this heavenly light, sort of shone down, but because I have a twin brother, and he decided not to be confirmed that year. And I remember distinctly asking myself, well, why am I being confirmed then? And again, maybe another myth, we don't sort of grow up knowing everything. But I remember thinking, what, God is important to me, and the church is important to me, and I'll figure out the rest later. Another key moment for me was when I was a junior in high school, 11th grade. I made a retreat that I know so many of you have made called Tech Teens Encounter Christ. And it was definitely an encounter with the Lord. It was an important moment because the faith more became my own as opposed to my parents', which was fine. But at some point, we do have to claim it in our relationship with God as our own. And through that encounter with Christ, I remember telling Jesus, I'll do whatever you want me to do. As I was getting on in high school, I thought I was meant to be a doctor. So I'm like, hey, thanks, Jesus, that's sweet. So I got into this pre-med program in Youngstown, and I didn't like science, but it's just sort of what you got to do, right? Yeah, so suffice it to say, it didn't work out. But that winter quarter the alarm clock went off on a random school day, the same time the alarm clock went off every other school day. And that particular day, it was like in February, it's like this time of year, the first thought that came to my mind was, forget this, I should go to seminary. I had never thought about it before, but there that thought was. And then I thought back and I was like, oh, crap, I told Jesus I'd do whatever he wanted. Yeah. But through that encounter and that desire to want to come after the Lord and see what he's going to make of us, I thought, well, I sort of got to try this out. So I transferred back to Bowling Green, and I didn't want it to be just a way of getting out of chemistry, so I sort of put it on the back burner on simmer, and that sort of call to check it out, just sort of grew over those college years, and so went off to seminary after college, which is not a priest factory. It's where you go to figure it out. A lot of guys go and they discern that's not what God is calling them to, and that's great because that's just as good as knowing what God is. Part of me was hoping I'd be one of those guys, but was open to whatever the Lord had in store. And that vocation just crystallized slowly over time. And I remember my prayer over those years went from, God, help me to know what you want me to do, to, all right, God, if this is what you want me to do, you got to help a brother out here. And of course, he certainly has. And we see in our gospel that Jesus calls ordinary people. Like there's nothing more ordinary, like back then, than just being a fisherman. He called these ordinary people to an extraordinary mission. And they weren't going to do it on their own. He made the invitation. And he says, I'm going to make you who I have chosen you to be. You know, Jesus, the second person of the Holy Trinity, made flesh, the light and life and salvation of the world. It's amazing that he chose not to do it just all on his own. Of course, God doesn't need anything or need anybody. But he chooses to need us in so many ways. He chooses to need us to complete his mission of gathering the whole world into a communion around him. And that's that call that each of us has as well. And, you know, whatever our vocation is, all of us have that call through our baptism. When we're baptized into Christ and into a church that, again, doesn't just have a mission, but is a mission. The mission to bring the light and life and salvation and new life of Christ to a world, especially a world we know is so much in need of it. You know, last week I mentioned again the 23 challenge, that in this year, 2023, to make it our missionary goal to just try to reconnect just one person or family that's become disconnected or disengaged from our parish community here. And hearing about that, someone said, well, are the numbers that bad that you have to do this? And I'm like, well, that's not the point. The point is they belong here, and they should be here, and they need to be here, and we're better and they're better by their being here. And that God has something in store for them here in our community. That's why we're called, because God has something in store for each and every person to help bring them into that relationship, into that communion for which each and every person was made. And it's our call to come after him and to do our part in fulfilling this great mission. Of course, like with those disciples, we're not left to do this on our own. We know we need the grace of God through our prayer, through the grace of God, through the Holy Spirit poured into us through confirmation, through our ongoing communion with Christ in the Eucharist. So as we encounter Christ here in the Mass today and are sent forth then back into the mission field, which is wherever we're at, let us allow Jesus to catch us again in a new way, to fill us with his life, and to use his strength and his grace to go and bring that life and light to the world.